Okay, I want to remind everybody that a recording is in progress, and also that the first word of our business is community. We are a community college, and that means that we do not act in a silo, and our actions have a ripple effect in the community. And so the work that we do to help people achieve their academic and career goals really is improving our economy, making our community more vibrant. And we need to do so because Fresno really does rank low in terms of income disparity, health access disparity, college attainment disparity, and the poverty gap. And like you, I believe that the best way for us to be able to move forward is by and through education. And then lay on top of that a pandemic and racial tension and racial awakening. Now more than ever, it's important that we have an educated citizenry. So what you're doing is incredibly important to the individual, but it's also important to the larger community as a whole. So with that, I say welcome to Fresno City College. Welcome about being part of this legacy where we welcome everyone, regardless if you family has a big house or a little house or no house at all. Regardless of what your religious beliefs, who you love, or what your ethnic background looks like, everyone is welcome here because we believe you belong here. So with that, I just want to say welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad you're decided to take up part of this legacy, to be part of your legacy. And I know Dr. Ramirez and everybody on this Zoom call is going to help you on your journey. I also want to give a thank you to Susie Nitzel. If you don't know who Susie Nitzel is yet, you will. She is our coordinator of professional development. You're also going to be able to meet your academic senate president. I think we have both the classified senate and faculty senate here, but you're going to learn a lot about your peers and about today's topic, which is equity, to be engaged, to be empowered, and to be energized. So with that, welcome.
Thank you very much, President Goldsmith, for your kind, welcoming opening remarks and reminding us about our individual and collective call to action. And we're going to continue to talk about that today and over the next 2 days. So thank you again very much, Dr. Goldsmith.
Thank you. And I do have to leave because I am a little double booked today, but have a wonderful day and I'll see you on campus soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And so with that, I'm going to turn this to our agenda for today. What you have here is our program outline that corresponds with the facilitators and presenters for each topic, each item that you see there. And we're going to do our very best to stay on schedule. We like to start on time and we like to end on time. And if we end earlier, that's also not a bad thing, right? So with that, you can view the program here today, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, another equity warrior and partner, and that's Dr. Donna Cooper, who is our Dean of Student Success and Learning here at Fresno City College. Donna's going to give us an overview of an exciting activity that we're all going to work on. So with that, the floor is yours, Donna.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Fresno City College. Honestly, I can't believe it's August the 2nd already and that school starts next week. So to introduce who I am the Dean of Student Success and Learning, and I oversee the library, tutorial services, the Career and Employment Center, and adult education, I think that's it. Anyway, so we in my area do a lot of support for your students to help them be successful. And we're going to talk about some of those kinds of things tomorrow. But today, my exciting job is to help you get familiar with our website and to know where you can send your students for things. Because especially in this environment where we're primarily online and we may not be able to engage with our students verbally as much as we would like to, it's always nice as instructors and classified staff to know, here's where I can send, here's a place a student can go to get more information. So what we have today is a short little scavenger hunt that we're going to do with you all. And we've posted the link to the questions, but don't peek at them quite yet. We have a few things that we're going to do. So What's going to happen is you're going to get into breakout rooms. And in one sense, this is an individual activity because we're sometimes competitive, sort of competitive. So we want it to be a bit of a race for you to work on it to see if you can find the answers, the links to where you need to go to get this information for students. And then you're going to have some time to do that. And then the first 3 people to finish, or the people with the most when it's time to finish, will get a Starbucks gift card from us for you to use your first week of school.
Carrie, all right, Carrie and team, everyone is back. So let's go ahead and continue with our program today. Very fortunate and pleased and honored to have Don Lopez here. Don is our Vice President of Instruction, as many of you know. Particularly if you're a new faculty hire, you have interacted with Don at least once.
Yep.
So with that, I get to turn it over to you, Don, for some opening and welcoming remarks. Thank you for being here.
Well, like I said, for those who I had said hello to already, and it's great to see your faces since many of you I haven't seen in some time, and some of you I've seen very recently. Like I mentioned, Carlos, just the other day, Carlos and I met as part of his interview process, and so it's good to see all of you here. Thank you for participating. We think this is a extremely important part of the onboarding for you as new faculty members. We have been working very hard for what, almost 5 years now on this, Ray? Something like that? About 5 years, right? On a process of helping you all to understand how we do things at the college, what our emphasis is, the importance that we place on the ideas of equity and inclusion. And so again, this is a really great program. I want to thank Ray and Carrie and everyone else who's been working to develop this and to put this on. I know it's a lot for you, as particularly for those who like just started. I'll keep going back to Carlos here, because Carlos, I think, is the last person I saw from an interview perspective just last week. And we know it's a lot, but we think it's a very, very important process, and we highly encourage you to fully engage in this process, to get as much out of it as you possibly can, which means you're going to have to put into it, right? And so I know, new preps, brand new place, all these other things. Take advantage of your colleagues, take advantage of your mentors, take advantage of your department chairs. Ask them for assistance. If you need some help with your shell, right, you can reach out to our distance education group, for instance, and they can work with you. We've got a ton of facilitators who are willing to help you. Some of you have been doing this a while as part-timers, and now you've just shifted into the full-time range. Michael, for instance, I know James has worked for us in the past as a part-time person as well. Eric, I believe, as well. Eric, good to see you here. So, take advantage of your colleagues that are around you. All the folks that are in this cohort, they're in the same boat that you are, right? Obviously, you're a new faculty member with us on a full-time basis, but Carrie and Ray have been doing this for some period of time. Carrie, I don't want to say is old at this. Carrie, sorry, I'm teasing you a little bit, but Carrie's been around for a while. Carrie's been doing this, and she really has a great understanding of how the institution works, all the different aspects of it. She's been on the Senate. She was a curriculum chair, right? And so she really knows how this institution works, all the ins and outs. So take advantage of that when you have people like Carrie that are on this group. And I'll brag on Ray a little bit here. Ray is becoming a superstar as far as it goes concerning equity and the way that this institution is being seen by other institutions throughout California. A lot of it has to do with Ray and the work that he's been doing and the participation that many people have been going through for the last 5 years. This is really becoming, it's becoming known as an institution where equity is first in all the things that we do, and we're being recognized as a leader in this. So you're lucky to be in an institution like this. If this is your very first time teaching with us, I think you're going to find that we are supportive. We have a professional development coordinator, obviously Susie. You got to get to know Susie and the things that she's doing. We give you plenty of opportunities for you to grow in your skills. And we ask that you just become engaged in this process, make sure that you're following through with it. And I think you're going to get a lot out of it. I really do. Everyone that's gone through this program has talked about, how beneficial it was to them, right? We've got a great new academic senate president, Michael Takeda. We had a really great president previously in Carla. And if you happen to work with Carla on things, you're going to know she's also part of a statewide group related to equity and ethnic studies. And she was sought out by the academic senate to do that. So you're in good company, folks. You're in really good company. So I appreciate the opportunity, Ray, to say hello to everybody. If you all need something, please reach out. We're here to help and assist. We want you to be successful so that our students are successful. Right? So Ray, anything else this morning?
No, that was wonderful, Don. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Have a
Good luck. We'll see you soon. Bye.
All right, everyone. We're going to continue with our program here. If you just give me a sec here, and I'm going to display my screen. And give me a thumbs up, someone, or a nod if you can see the screen here. Good to go?
Yep.
All right, perfect, wonderful. So just a reminder of the program and where we are headed for today's New Employee Equity Academy events. We're doing pretty well in terms of the schedule and timing. At some point in the morning, we knew that President Goldsmith and Vice President of Instruction, Don Lopez, were going to come and provide some welcoming remarks. And we thought it was going to be around this period here, and they came in a little earlier, which works out well. The next portion here, it's a brief set of slides on our college's commitment to racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I know those of you that were able to join the kickoff event a couple weeks ago, you heard some of the information about our focus on equity and especially racial equity at Fresno City College. I also know that there's other colleagues who were not able to attend that event for several reasons. Some of you were just hired between the initial kickoff event and today, or you couldn't join, right? For other reasons, as mentioned. So I am going to revisit a couple things that I covered in the kickoff, which is not a bad thing, because one, I can rejaw your memory and draw your attention to some of the important factors and concepts that are guiding our collective work at Fresno City College, and also talk about, pardon me, a little bit about why our institution is committed to racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's very important. These are words, and we know that words matter. And I have a very powerful, thought-provoking quote from a focus group that we conducted. Was that 2015, Carol? I thought it was 2016. Regardless of the year, the quote that one of our students shared, it kind of frames and sets context for the next set of slides that we're going to engage in. So to understand our commitment to racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, it in part requires us to have a general understanding of what institutional racism is, right? Or systemic racism. And if you were to ask the number of people who are attending today's event how they would define systemic racism, you might get the same amount of responses that are different in the number of people that are attending, right? So if we have 35 people here, we're probably gonna get 35 different responses. So this is a small clip that I'm gonna share with everyone, again, to inform the subsequent slides that I'm gonna share. And just to make sure that we're all kind of at least operating from the same place of understanding as it relates to systemic racism. And so if you've seen this video before, wonderful, no spoiler alerts. And if you haven't, that is equally wonderful, because again, this will help ground us from the same place of understanding, at least for today's slides.
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids.
So it's a vignette or a clip of a larger clip. But the reason why I shared that video, because one of the frameworks that we use to guide our work at Fresno City College is equity mindedness, right? And so we covered that very briefly in the kickoff event. And I see a lot of familiar faces and colleagues who attended, but also see some who weren't there. And so just in a nutshell, equity mindedness, or this concept of equity mindedness, increasingly higher education practitioners, faculty, administrators, scholars are talking about equity and equity mindedness. But seldom have I heard in those spaces, right, in events and gatherings, those same people unpack it and define what equity mindedness is. So in a nutshell, according to Professor Estela Ben-Simon and other colleagues, equity mindedness specifically refers to individuals or practitioners in higher education who are systemically aware, institutionally focused, race conscious in a positive and affirming manner, and probably most importantly, equity advancing, that you are advancing and trying to actualize equity in experiences and outcomes. So that concept that's been guiding equity mindedness, that's been guiding a lot of our work at Fresno City College. Two of those tenets or two of those principles of equity mindedness, which is being institutionally focused and systemically aware, it ties very well into systemic racism. So one who is equity mindedness acknowledges that systemic racism exists in historical and modern contexts and is what is reproducing these outcome disparities across many observable and measurable areas, not just in education. And so you heard in that video clip a small reference to redlining. Fresno is not immune to forms of institutional racism and redlining. Case in point, this is just one example. There were several articles that were featured in The Atlantic about the racial trauma that continues to impact communities of color in the Fresno proper area and beyond. And what you see here is an old map, a city map, a planning and zoning map. And the red areas were deemed in official government documents as less favorable for white populations, and therefore relegated to primarily Black and African American, Native American, Asian, and Latinx people. And so, in case you're not familiar with this map in Fresno in general, I want to draw your attention to this line right here. Do you see my little finger pointing up right here, the cursor, the line? So this is Highway 99, the famous or infamous Highway 99. You might have heard of it if you're not from the area. But in official government documents and even reports, this was referred to as the Mason-Dixon line. And why is that significant? Because literally this highway, once upon a time, being referred to the north and south, as it were, and separating marginalized communities from those that are not, is what this was referred to. And you can see the red areas that were relegated to predominantly racially minoritized communities. And these same areas today in some parts of Fresno, right, in some of these segments, things remain the same in terms of quality of life, life expectancy, right? education attainment rates, and even ownership, land ownership, right? No one really owns these lands, with the exception of the first people and Native Americans to the area. However, those who buy houses on that land, very few of those individuals are people of color in those same areas of Fresno today. And so to the previous point in the video, and the traumatic legacy of racism in the United States, it has a residual effect on the people in our communities. And the reason why that's important to us as a college and as a district is because we're an open access institution. We accept every student that applies. We're not a Research 1 university. We're not a Research 2 university. We're not selective, right? So we have so much opportunity to be either the gateway or gatekeeper to higher education for these very same communities. And I hope you will join me and my colleagues that are helping put this on for you today, and being part of the increasingly large group of colleagues who want to make Fresno City College the gateway to post-secondary education. And so with that, I'm going to share a couple other salient data points, just in case you're not familiar. And if you're not new to Fresno, you might be familiar with some of this, and perhaps maybe not so precisely. And so these data that I'm going to display and talk about briefly, just a little note, they're somewhat stale. Some are from 2017, 18, and 19. Nonetheless, 3 years since then, or 4 years, depending on when the data were pulled, not much has changed. What is more, those data are probably even more dismal or more depressing and aberrant for communities of color. So you hear people probably talk about in the Fresno area that, you know, income and quality of life, right? It varies, right? And there's a lot of stigma with Fresno. I embrace the stigmas, and I know my colleagues do as well, because we're trying to break those stigmas, right? And we're trying to create upward mobility, particularly for these communities and these minoritized communities in Fresno and in Fresno County and beyond. And so what you see here, this is not an anomaly. This is not anonymous data, right? It didn't just happen overnight. It wasn't just pulled out of thin air. And although this isn't a data presentation, we can pull historical longitudinal data, and what we'll see is that that gap, that income inequality gap between white, Latinx, Black, and even more so dismal for our Native American brothers and sisters in community, which isn't displayed in the slide because we borrowed this from the Fresno Drive Initiative, and this was the key elements they were presenting on, but it's even more low in those areas. We see similar patterns in human capital, right? So forms of human capital such as pre-primary, before kindergarten, right? Primary, secondary, and post-secondary or higher education, right? These factors are all sequential preconditions to get to a good quality of life, right? And they're all preconditions to upward mobility or social mobility, if you will, right? And what we know about the Fresno area and Fresno County is that our communities of color are being systemically disenfranchised in ways that their counterparts are not. And we know this through the lived experience and stories, not only of those individuals, right? But we know that through data. And so when you see this, just think about life expectancy, for example, in the Atlantic, that article that I was previously talking about. What we know is that essentially what I'll summarize, and this isn't an exhaustive statement, but I will summarize. The more north you live of Shaw and Fresno, the more likely you are to live longer, right? You'll live longer essentially, and not just by a few years. If you're a Black African American and you live south of Shaw, and especially in areas of West Fresno, life expectancy is anywhere from 3 to 3.5 times less than those living north of Shaw in Fresno. And so think about that briefly, and then as you're chewing on that thought, overlay your thoughts with this map, this redlining map that you see here. Shaw would be, the university, Fresno State is up about here, so Shaw would be approximately right here, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about that, this is historical, right? But everything historical has a modern implication, right? And everything that's done historically has a modern effect. And so those residual effects of once upon a time ago are not so distant when you think about it in the terms that I just laid out. And so That's something that I want to invite you to think about throughout today's presentation, and even more so tomorrow and the next day. I know I'm sharing some dismal and sobering data, but this is the why. This is why we are committed to racial equity, diversity, and inclusion at Fresno City College. We are the flagship community college, not only in Fresno, but in the Central Valley. We're California's first community college. And so therein lies our reasons for why we are committed to racial equity, inclusion, and diversity.
Ray,
Yes.
on that map from 1937, the West Fresno red blob that you have down here in this group down here, that was the only part of the city until 1965 that also didn't have restrictive covenants. So that's why it was at one time Chinatown, at one time Armenia Town, at one time, and now it's predominantly Black. And the only other area that didn't have them initially, but it got them later, was Sunnyside. And Sunnyside used to be the Black neighborhood because Butler in the 1880s brought a bunch of African Americans to Fresno to work in the fields. And so around Butler Farms, which is over by Butler Avenue, there was, which is in Sunnyside, there was a Black community, but they pretty much got run out. And the only place they could continue to live was West Fresno until 1965. Clovis was a sundown town, as was Reedley and a couple of others. They couldn't live there. And so that's why today, some of the zip codes in that block are still 75% African American.
Thank you so much. And of course, it does take a professor of history to unpack that a little more for us. And I really, truly appreciate you sharing that. And it just, it underscores, the reason for our commitment to racial equity, diversity, inclusion. We're gonna have to, I made note to actually incorporate into maybe some future planning presentations.
I just sent you some you can just copy it.
Thank you.
Yep.
So something that we shared in the kickoff event, and again, I think almost half of you were not able to attend the New Employee Equity Academy kickoff event. Dr. Stella Ben-Simone, who coined the phrase equity mindedness in the context of higher education, talks about equity being a journey and not necessarily a destination. And what she means by that is that getting to a place of equity and experiences and outcomes for our students isn't solely about what you do to accomplish an outcome. It's about your beliefs, your values, your dispositions, and the multitude of experiences that you have, and how those factors and items help you view and make sense of issues of equity. And so everyone is at a different point in their equity journey, and it's also ongoing. Me, who's someone that I've dedicated my life to equity and social justice, right? I also embrace this concept that Ben-Simone encourages people to think about, because it is just that, it is a journey, and there's always something to learn. There's always something to reflect on. And so, as I shared in the kickoff event, this equity journey begins with you. Change must happen individually before it can happen collectively. What we're trying to do as an institution is the collective part, but it takes the individual change first to get to that collective change. And so, as you embark on your new journey at Fresno City College, we're going to help you throughout your equity journey. And that's why you're all going to have, we have faculty guides, and we have guides for our classified professionals and new administrators who are going to try to facilitate your equity journey and learning experience, at least in the first semester or two at the college. I also shared this at the kickoff event. I am not going to belabor this slide. You can read it on your own. But what you have here in essence is a small snapshot of Fresno City College's equity journey. It is not exhaustive, it is but a snapshot. What I will say is that around 2015 and around 2016, the way that this college addressed equity gaps was predominantly through programs and departments, right? So there was not an institutional level or college-wide focus on addressing equity gaps. Dare I say, and Carrie and other colleagues can call me on this, but dare I say there was even a college-wide not commitment, a college-wide acknowledgement of racial equity gaps, right? And so that didn't happen until much later. And I'm gonna fast forward over time. So jump in a time machine with me, and I'm gonna take you to where we're at right now. We have essentially done a 180 shift, not completely, but that's the direction we're headed, where we're really trying to embed concepts of equity mindedness and anti-racism into the fabric of our college. How so? Right now, today, like currently, we've been working on trying to embed those concepts in our draft strategic plan. So our draft mission statement, vision, core values, which will inform the overall strategic plan, because our current strategic plan is going to sunset, it's going to end pretty soon. Our college is a 4-year strategic planning cycle, so we're updating it as we speak. And you all will see the new draft. It's going to go through the constituency review process for review, feedback, and voting. And when it is finally approved, if it is remotely similar to the draft mission, vision, and core values we currently have, we are saying as a college, as an institution, that we are officially committed to equity mindedness and principles of anti-racism as a way to transform lives through education. And so that gives me a lot of hope, and that makes me very excited about the future of the college. And more importantly, it makes me excited about the opportunities for our communities. Come on, slide. So this is where we're at. In a similar way, I want to point out something that it was a proud moment and yet sad at the same time. Because in the history of this college, right, having been founded in 1910, there is a long-standing history of this college. According to my research and conversation with colleagues and people who have a lot of historical knowledge of the institution, even faculty emeriti and people who are retired, the college had never officially acknowledged the ancestral territories of this land, right? The land of the Native American people and who this belongs to until 2019. So we have a student equity plan, and our current student equity plan for 2019-2021, I worked with one of our few Native American full-time faculty on campus to create a statement that would officially acknowledge that the college sits on the ancestral and native lands of the Yokuts and Mono tribes and peoples. And although that seems simple to a lot of you, it's an institutional acknowledgement of that this land is symbolic, this land is meaningful, and we acknowledge that it does not belong to us, that it belongs to the original peoples of this territory. And so that was very special, because besides the monument that we have here on Fresno State College for the Yokuts and Mono tribes and peoples, there had never been a document beyond the student newspaper and the Fresno Bee that officially acknowledged that. And so our student equity plan had to be vetted through every constituency group, voted on and approved by our board of trustees. And so therefore, that's why in an official context, these ancestral lands that belong to the Yokuts and Mono tribes and people finally was acknowledged. And all that to share that we are headed in a direction that is bright. We're headed in a direction that I think is very opportune for many of our marginalized and disenfranchised communities. So you have support from the college. I shared this at the kickoff meeting, and I'm not going to read everything. This is a joint academic senate and classified senate anti-racist resolution on anti-racism, essentially, right? This is important because our classified senate and academic senate joined forces and had the privilege and honor of also participating in this group to create a very meaningful resolution on anti-racism. And there's something that I want to point out for everyone with regards to anti-racism and when this was created over the past year. It took our college nearly a year to create this because we wanted it to be meaningful. Most colleges and universities in the state, they produced anti-racist resolutions within a matter of days, if not weeks, shortly after the public assassination of Mr. Floyd that we all witnessed. It took us a lot longer because we wanted to do something meaningful along the lines of this statement here that I think captures the sentiment of why this resolution was created. This moment calls for individual and collective courage and an anti-racist approach as we stand in solidarity against social injustice and racism. Racial conciliation and the healing of historical trauma is only possible if we make authentic commitments to racial justice, as well as civil and human rights for all peoples and communities. Profound and thought-provoking. This was created and approved by your academic senate and classified senate colleagues. In a similar way, you have institutional support in the form of resolutions from our district. Recently, over the past year, and even most recently with the LGBTQ plus Pride Month resolution, these were just, created over the past year. So we have the anti-racist resolution from the district. This is something that was created by and adopted by our board of trustees. I shouldn't just say created. The chancellor's cabinet and other colleagues from across the district created this resolution, and it was unanimously adopted by our board of trustees. Therefore, you have a board of trustees and district leadership who stands by principles of anti-racism, right? In a similar way, those same individuals and colleagues produce a resolution titled Condemning Hate Crimes Targeting Asian Americans, right? And most recently, the recognition of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus month for the first time in the history of this district and college was acknowledged officially as being Pride Month. And our very own President Goldsmith and other colleagues was able to raise the Pride flag over Fresno City College for the first time ever. And word has it, I might have been involved in personal conversations, I might not have. Our very own Mayor Dyer was so much moved by this event that it was an influential factor in his ultimate decision to creating Pride Month as a national recognition in the city of Fresno and raising the flag over City Hall. That's phenomenal, extremely phenomenal. We're influencing things here at the college, in our community and beyond, and you're all going to be part of that work. However, in the words of Paulo Freire, words without action are useless, right? And so although we have these resolutions and we have these strong support statements, unless these words are actualized or unless these words are turned into observable behavior, right? Then they're not going to manifest themselves in the way that the resolutions are written. And so with that, I invite you to think about these resolutions and some of the information that I covered and think about how you can actively get involved and engaged in doing racial equity, diversity, and inclusion work. And getting involved might just be reading about something, learning about something, talking to someone. Everyone is at a different point in their equity journey, and that's a beautiful thing about this work. So with that, I will turn it over to Carol Rains-Heisdorf. Carol is going to walk us through some more data, yay. But really to kind of humanize the data, the title of this segment of the presentation is Listening to Our Students Through Campus-Wide Inquiry. And with that, I turn it over to you, Carol. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes, great. So I'm Carol Rains-Heisdorf. I'm a Senior Research and Planning Analyst here in the Institutional Research Office. Our director, Dr. Alex Adams, couldn't be here today, so I'm stepping in for him. And really what we're going to talk about today is about listening to our students and their journey. In addition to equity, one of the things that we've really been focusing on is our guided pathways. And here at Fresno City College, we look at that from a journey of our students. So what we want to be looking at and hearing from our students is about their journey and what their journey means to them. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. And I also want to recognize, correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, that in this group, there's classified and faculty, perhaps also management, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Great. So what I really want to emphasize, the IR office is composed of a manager and everyone else are classified professionals. So the work that we do is not only faculty work, but it's work for classified professionals. And that's really important to recognize because oftentimes classified professional is the first one that the students get to see when they come to the campus. So this equity work is really important from a classified perspective because you also get to hear that student voice and you get to be that first connection oftentimes with the students. So there's a link there. And on our campus over the years, our office has also engaged in this equity work, and how we look at our students has changed over the years. And what we do is really try to hear that voice and hear it from that racial equity perspective. So we have several things that we've worked on that you can access and go and look at and read and explore. We did a series of focus groups. It was over a couple-year period. We took several semesters so that we could really hear the voice of our students, and our students will tell us all the wonderful work that we do and what we really want to continue in. And they'll also bring to light those things that we need to work on and we need to change. And what I'm really excited about in what Ray had talked about earlier is that you're going to have someone that you can help unpack this with throughout your first semester here. And that's what's really exciting, because this work takes a lot of talk and dialogue and thinking and someone to talk this through. They're hard conversations to have. And when you look at our data, it brings about those things that make you really have to think, and it's good. And I'm really excited that we have this opportunity for you guys to have someone to help you unpack some of this work. You can go to the next slide, Ray. So part of who we are and part of what we've looked at is our diversity. And over the years, we've worked with our district office, and Ray, you're gonna have to remind me of what it was called that we were involved in, to help us change who we are and how we're hiring. What was the group that we were part of, Ray?
So our Fresno City College and State Center Community College District, our Human Resource Department specifically, we worked with actually Dr. Estela Ben Simone at the University of Southern California Center for Urban Education to focus on equity and diversity in hiring practices.
That's great. So what we're trying to do is to change the way that we advertise, who we're advertising to. They've developed a whole series of training so that when we're on hiring committees, we're using an equity-minded lens. So all that we're working on, it's not just looking at our students, but it's looking at ourselves and what are we doing and how are we changing the ways that we think about how we are hiring. So as you can see from this slide, there are, for our Hispanic population, we have a much higher student population than we do for the employees that are here. And you can also see that our white non-Hispanic is much higher for our faculty than for who our students are. So we have some areas that we still need to work on. But we are making steps towards changing that, because the data indicates that it helps students to be able to see persons of color that reflect who they are. Next slide. And this slide is about our data dashboards. So we have let's see, right where we have a lot of data, and our data is disaggregated typically on all of our dashboards by multiple items you can filter through, but most importantly by gender and race and ethnicity. We have a dashboard that you can type in what it is that you're looking for. So it's like a word cloud. So some of our data can be overwhelming, but you can go to that one and you can type in and it'll bring up all the dashboards that we have that are related to the topic that you're looking for. And we have program review dashboards. We have those that are for special programs. We have comparative dashboards. So we have a lot of data for you to be able to look at and dig into if you want to learn more about our students. One other thing that I want to mention, and I'm kind of giving you an abbreviated version because you've been listening for a long time and I know you're probably ready for a break. But one other thing that I really want you to think about and to understand is that in addition to looking at our students and hearing their voice, we really try as an office to also hear the faculty voice and the classified voice and the management voice. So when COVID happened, we did a survey to reach out to our students to understand the impact of COVID and the shifting to online learning. But we also did a survey for faculty and for classified professionals because we wanted to hear their voice and how this was impacting them to better understand so that we can serve them and meet their needs throughout all of what's happening with COVID. And we try to do that. We recently also did a survey that was conducted by an external organization to better understand the culture that we are now in anti-racism. And that was done with students, but they're also going to be doing it with faculty and then with management classified so that we can really have a holistic understanding. And one thing that I really appreciated from Dr. Goldsmith, what she said at the very beginning is that we're a community. And that's really what it's about. It's about us as a community supporting our students, supporting each other, and supporting our community at large. So if you have any questions, you can go to our dashboard anytime. Our office is here and we're available to help you. We have a data request form that you can fill out, and we would be happy to provide data in the context of what it is that you're doing in your leadership and faculty and classified professional. And if you have any questions, I don't know, looking at the chat, I think Susie added the links there. But if there aren't any questions, I have another meeting that I get to go to. Thank you very much.
My mute button. Thank you, Carol. Carol's being really humble. Carol's always very humble and won't toot her own horn or the institutional research department. But what I'm not. I'll toot the horn. I want you all to know, just in case you're not aware, but institutional research, those departments in community college, they're very important. They play such a key role in everything at the college, everything. So Carol mentioned program review. You may not be familiar with what program review, but that is something that it's the backbone of the college from the perspective of that's the process by which you use to assess your programs and their effectiveness, right? And that effectiveness is defined by the college mission, the college vision, core values, right? And the strategic plan, right? Everything that we do in the institution, it has to align to the strategic plan. So it's very helpful to have a very strong and equity-minded office of colleagues. And we have a rather large office. It's an office of how many, Carol? 7?
We have 5 and our directors, so there's 6.
6,
Well,
okay.
yeah, 6.
That's right. So we're very fortunate at Fresno City College to have 6 researchers in the Institutional Research and Effectiveness Office. And that's a testament of the commitment from the president's executive cabinet. So all the vice presidents and the president herself, of course, Dr. Goldsmith, they see the need for a robust research office. And we have one of the best, if not best, research offices in the state. And I know quite a few of the key researchers in the state, and we do get a lot of kudos for the work that we're doing. So Carol, thank you so much. And if there's any questions for Carol, this would be a good time. And if not, then I know that Carol has to go to a meeting soon. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. And since you mentioned program review, I'm just going to do a quick plug for Carrie. We're doing a flex activity, and it's around program review, but it's really to get faculty voice. So again, I really want you guys to, any opportunities or surveys that you see us send out, take that as an opportunity for us to hear your voice, classifieds and faculty and management. So again, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your sessions.
Thank you, Carol. All right. So I think what we'll do now is we scheduled a break for 10:30. And it looks like we're a few minutes ahead, that's fine. That's not a bad thing. Let's go ahead and take a little break. And what time should we come back, Susie?
15 minutes, Ray. So I can't do math.
That's okay. Let's come back at 10:40, everyone, okay? See you all at 10:40. Get some refreshments, a beverage, take a quick break, and we'll see you soon. All right, how's everyone doing? You doing okay? Hanging in there? All right, good. So we'll finish just in time or actually before lunch. We understand we're probably the last thing between you and getting a midday bite, so that's pretty important. So we're gonna go to the next section now, and I get to introduce a wonderful colleague of mine, who is Carrie Ibarra. Carrie is our Guided Pathways coordinator at the college. So she is leading most, if not all of our Guided Pathways efforts. Certainly there are other colleagues who make it all happen, but Carrie is definitely the one who's facilitating all of the college level Guided Pathways work. And for those of you that are like, what is he talking about? So what is Guided Pathways? Like, I have no idea what he's talking about. She's going to talk about what that is, and you'll understand why it's significant. At least I'm saying it's significant. A lot of the stuff that I shared previously about the equity work we're doing at the college, you know, a lot of it is because of my equity partners in crime, like Carrie Ibarra, Susie Nitzel, who's on the call, a classified Senate president. Michael Takata, who is on the call, is our new academic Senate president. Another equity partner in crime, Carla Kirk, who is the past academic Senate president. Dave Childers is on this call as well, our Title V director. So many key colleagues have been very instrumental in implementing and sustaining a lot of the equity efforts at the college, a lot of the stuff that you heard me talk about today and at the Kickoff Academy. So with that, it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Carrie. Carrie is absolutely wonderful, and she's going to share a little bit about our Guided Pathways work and some of the stuff that you need to know in the first few days or week of college. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Carrie.
Thank you, Ray. Actually, there's a little bit of confusion that we're actually covering the Guided Pathways on the third day. We're doing the pathway teams today. So I will talk a tiny bit about Guided Pathways, but primarily the pathway teams, which there has been some confusion, as you can see. That happens. So yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Ray. And yes, there's an amazing team of people that we work together to make all this work happen. Ray and I actually co-chaired previously the Guided Pathways work group. So Ray's been heavily involved in that. So my name is Carrie McCutcheon Ibarra. I say that because I'm transitioning back to my maiden name. So I have it on my screen as McCutcheon Ibarra, trying to get people used to it. And then in a few months, when you see McCutcheon, you'll know who that is. I'm the Guided Pathways coordinator, but I'm also a philosophy instructor. So I've been a philosophy instructor at Fresno City College since 2006. Like some of you, I was hired as a temp. I was a 1 semester full-time temp, and then was hired full-time in 2007. So I've been a full-time instructor at Fresno City College since 2007. And as Don mentioned earlier, I do have a lot of background. I've been on the Academic Senate almost the entire time that I've been here. And I was the curriculum chair. So I do have a lot of information. I'm a good resource as a faculty member. If you want to ask me questions or shoot me an email, please feel free to do that. So Ray, do you mind moving on to the next slide?
Yeah, and I wanted to apologize because Carrie, I left out McCutcheon in your title.
That's okay.
That was my sorry about that.
That's okay. I don't think I corrected it there. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about some of the logistics for the first couple of weeks of classes. And I know that not all of you are faculty members, but it's still good information to know. So you know, if you might be in an area where you need to prompt a faculty member for a particular thing, or it's definitely relevant to the work that you do as well. And I'm also going to give you an introduction to our pathway teams. So if you don't, and then we're going to omit the classroom as racialized spaces because we're going to do that on day 3. So that'll give us a little extra time. And I'm definitely not taking an hour. So we have an hour for this section. And I want you to please feel free to either raise your hand to ask questions or put questions in the chat, and if my colleagues can help me monitor, that would be great, because if you ask questions as they come up, that's completely fine. Don't wait for me to finish if you have a question that comes up. So Ray, would you mind advancing? Okay, so ad codes for instructors. Ad codes, you can give ad codes on the first day of class to students. You cannot give them before, at least historically, you've not been able to have access to those codes. And they can use them up through the 3rd week. I always encourage students, that's for the 18 weeks. So if you're teaching a 9-week, then you need to look for what's called census date. So they have to use the ad codes by census date, which is the 3rd Friday of the semester. If you're going to add over your class cap, so every class has a cap, the maximum students that can enroll in the class, then check with your dean if they didn't let you know already. And this, over the years, I'm not kidding, this has gone, some years it's do not go over cap by 1 student, period. And others it's please add as many students as you possibly can. I believe right now we are in that add as many students as you possibly can because our enrollments are down. But still check with your dean if you're going to add over the class cap. So if your cap is 30 students and you have 5 on the wait list and you want to add all of them, just check with your dean if your dean doesn't let you know in advance of that. And be really careful about overtaxing yourself. For those of us, if you're teaching 5 sections, then try not to go too much over the cap, because it's already, most of us already have loads that are really heavy, especially if you teach classes that for English instructors and my colleagues, there's 2 of my colleagues in the philosophy department that have a lot of writing. If you think about the amount of writing that you're requiring for a semester, and then you multiply that by 5 more students, it really adds up. So make sure you're careful about that. Any questions about the ad codes and adding students? Okay.
One comment on the ad codes.
Yes.
The students on the wait list and someone drops before the start of class, they automatically move in. But if somebody drops after, they don't.
Correct.
So waitlist students don't automatically, now at state
Right.
and some of the other places, they do automatically move up into the semester, but
Yeah.
here they don't. So just because they're on the wait list doesn't mean they're in the class when somebody drops.
That's right. And even if it's before the, thank you so much, Michael, for pointing that out. Even if it's before the start of the semester, it's still a delay. The students are sent an email, so they're not even added in if they're on the wait list. They're sent an email because students can be on multiple wait lists, and that's their reasoning for not automatically. So it's not automatic. So sometimes you might see a delay where you have, if your class cap is 30 and you have a wait list, you might see it's at 28 and you still have a late wait list, and that's why that happens. So yeah, and you have to monitor that once the class starts. So you do need to make sure that you're going in order of your wait list, but only if the students are actively engaged in the class. So you want to make sure that you're careful about that.
Carrie, Victoria has a question.
Yes.
How does this apply to asynchronous courses?
To the asynchronous, yes, I was afraid that question would come up because I have not taught an asynchronous class. So Michael, do you know how to handle that with the asynchronous?
I do it the same way as I do with any class, except I don't do the automatic drops on the first day. I
Yeah.
check to see if they've checked in. If they weren't at the first Zoom session, then I wait the whole week to see if they've ever logged on. If they've never logged on, then I automatically drop them. I send out an email to everybody saying, look, if you're going to drop, do it now. And then I add everybody I can.
Yeah, I think the question, Victoria, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if you kind of create your own like moment when you do the drop no shows for asynchronous. And it seems like the suggestion was like at the end of the first week of the course. So I'm gathering it's like an internal deadline for yourself. Yeah,
and I'm reminded I did teach an asynchronous last year. I forgot. I'm on reassign, so I'm not teaching it all right now. But for the I gave them till the end of the week to make sure that they had done something in the class, and I let them know. I sent them out right away. You have until, I might have even said Wednesday, please, post in the discussion by Wednesday, and then you could drop those students.
Can I chime in real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, so I've taught a lot of asynchronous classes. I do tend to wait, and if they haven't done anything by Sunday evening, that's when I'm going to drop them. And I do that because there are some students who, even though it's the first week of school, they're not necessarily in the pattern of going to school yet. They don't know what your class pattern is. So like I have some things that are due Friday that first week that are pretty simple, but they're still due. And
Yeah.
so I give them that in case they're one of these students that likes to come in on the weekend, or maybe they work all week. And so the weekend is their only time. I just really recommend waiting till Sunday evening. But I do tend to add a couple students right off the bat from the wait list, because I mean, odds are you're going to lose a couple students. And so.
Right.
Yeah.
So the one issue that I think might come up is if you're waiting too long, and you're waiting to add students based on students who are dropping, those students can't have access to Canvas. So you want to make sure that you're, and again, I think we're not really right now in that situation, I think, where we have a lot of classes that are over enrolled. But if there's students that are waiting to add and you're waiting to drop other students, then they are missing out on those contact hours during that time.
It also takes a day for them to show up in Canvas because of the overnight processing. So if they sign up on Wednesday, if you've got assignments due on Friday, they don't get logged in until Thursday.
Yeah.
That's why I tend to add a couple just right at the very beginning.
Yeah. And also, I usually contact them. I just don't automatically add students on the wait list because they could be in other classes. They could have found something else. So they don't drop off the wait list. So you want to make sure that you check on that. Okay, so do your drops and no-shows as soon as possible. We actually just talked about that a little bit. And then some things to keep in mind. After the third week of class in an 18-week class, students receive a mark on their transcript, and that counts as a take. They can only take any particular class, they can only take it 3 times, and that's in the state of California. So for English 1A, if a student takes English 1A 3 times, they can no longer take it anywhere in the system, the community college system. There's obviously exceptions, and there's forms you can fill out, but that's the official, and there's equity issues there, right? Because students who know how to work their way around it will, they're the ones who will appeal. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're dropping inactive students prior to the end of the third week, because otherwise it's just harming them. You can always reinstate them after, if they come to you and say, I was in a coma, I'm here, I really want to be in the class. There's ways around that, but once that mark is on their transcript, it counts as a take, and that's for financial aid as well. And I believe financial aid, it's twice. You can only take it twice, and then you cannot get financial aid for the third time that you take the class. So those are really good things to keep in mind as you're dropping students. Also, even if a student shows up or is active in the first day, if there's another week where they're not active, usually I'll contact them and reach out to them. And before I drop any students at all, I will send them an email and say, hey, please contact me if you're still interested in the class. Otherwise, I'm going to drop you by, and I give them a good amount of time, 3 or 4 days to reply. So make sure that you're dropping those students who are not active. Financial aid, I just went over. Our Vice President of Student Services wanted to ask you all to let students know that they can still receive financial aid if they haven't already applied for financial aid. There's still time, and there's payments that are coming out. She also wanted me to let you know that students they've received one of their financial aid payments, but the other one doesn't come until after the start of the semester. So she asked for grace in terms of book purchases, giving students time to purchase their texts. And on that note, I'm going to say, please seriously think about using OER, Open Educational Resources, and not using texts that students have to pay for. And I'm sure you're hearing about that in your Canvas trainings, but it's not easy if you haven't done it before, but there's a lot of people to help you if you want to figure out how to do a no-cost classroom. And we're really encouraging people to do that as much as possible. Any questions about that, the drops, financial aid, anything more on ad codes? Speedy forms. So speedy forms, don't ask me what the acronym is for, I have no idea, but they're a very taboo thing with your deans. So speedy forms, this is if a student is added after census date. This is strongly discouraged by the college because we do not receive apportionment for students who are added after census date. So for the 18 weeks, do not add students after that 3rd week. However, crazy things happen. So it might be less so in online. I just can't imagine it happening in an online environment, but in a face-to-face environment, it could be that a student is showing up to class. And this is why it's really important not to add the student to Canvas, because it's possible to do that, but do not add them to Canvas unless they're enrolled in the class. And this is one of the reasons why, because if a student is in class and they're participating and they're turning things in, then you might think they've used their ad code. But if they don't, then after the 3rd week, if you add them after, then the college doesn't get money for that student. We don't get apportionment. So they really discourage using those speedy forms. So for that reason, don't add anybody to your Canvas unless they're enrolled. And
Carrie?
Yeah.
Where would they get speedy forms if they needed them?
You have to get those from your dean, and you have to have permission from your dean. So it's not an automatic thing either. So if you fill out a speedy form, it doesn't automatically mean you kind of have to grovel with your dean, and you might get a slap on the wrist. It happened. Things happen. I think in my 15 years, I've done maybe 1, maybe 2. I know I've done at least 1. That was my error. And they'll be forgiving, but it's kind of a big deal. So try not to do it. No, you're not going to be in trouble if it happens, but you want to really try not to do it. Any questions about that? And sometimes there's really, really good reasons to do them. So it does happen. Starfish early alert. So you will get notices. There's stages throughout the semester where you'll get notices about Starfish early alert and invitation. And what this is to notify the pathway team that I'm going to talk about in a minute, if a student needs some additional supports, or if the student is missing class, if you have a student who is failing assignments, or if you have a student who you think needs tutorial services, you can go into Starfish Early Alert and you'll get the link. Yeah, you don't have to memorize how to find that right now, but you'll get a link in your email to follow Starfish Early Alert. And you can click on the student and you can say what supports that the student needs, or the student hasn't been in class. So then the team, the pathway team, somebody from the team will reach out to that student and they'll provide services. There's also a link for psych services, but I believe we have Sam. What's Sam's last name? I'm forgetting. Montano. I believe he's going to come talk to them about psych services, and I think there's different ways to access if you need help with a student, if you suspect a student needs some help in that area. And then Flex Day is Friday, August 6th, and if you're a faculty member, you've all received the from your dean, I'm assuming. I hope all the deans have done this, the Flex Day forms. Susie has done an amazing job in coordinating the Flex Day activities. So she's the person that handles that. Those you can sign up. It's for full-time faculty. It's required to do 5 hours of Flex. Part-time faculty, it's not required, but they are welcome to attend and they get paid for it. And correct me if I'm wrong, Susie, but classified can attend, but they have to clear it with their supervisor. Is that correct, Susie?
Correct. Classified are encouraged to attend, but check with your manager first.
Okay. Yes, you check with your.
And administrators can come too.
Yes, and administrators. Anybody is welcome to the Flex. And I'm going to give a plug. So Carol Rains Heisdorf plugged the program review Flex. That one probably more so for people who have been around a little bit and might have some idea of what you think might be good in a program review. You're all welcome to come. I would love that. But I also want to plug the RAM Racial Equity Labs that I'm doing with Marianne Valentino. If you have questions about what the RAM Racial Equity Labs are, I know they've talked about it in this session and some of you have already signed up. But if you still have lingering questions, that session is not going to be recorded because we want people to come feeling free to answer any questions that you have or concerns that you might have. And that is also open to all faculty, classified, and management. So please come to that if you'd like. There's also something called Flexible Flex. So this is in the contract, or these are contract days for us, faculty members. You don't have to do your hours on Flex Day, but if you have alternate activities, they have to be approved by your dean in advance. So my recommendation, if you're new, is to just find 5 hours that you like on the activities that are provided for you on Friday. If not, then there's things like conferences. You can't do anything that you can't do anything that's related to prepping your class. So you can't use your, oh, I'm working on my syllabus, that's my flex time. That doesn't work. So it has to be approved activities that are professional development activities. So you can check with your department chairs for various things. I've definitely used conference attendance in the past. I attend so many conferences that usually, well, I do a lot of them now, so I'm here anyway. But in the past, I've definitely used my conferences for Flex. So, and it's 10 hours for the full year, and you can bank hours. So if you do a conference, and if you go to a conference over Thanksgiving, it can't be during work time. Or if you go on a weekend and you spend 10 hours at that conference, then you can count that for your full year. Any questions about Flex? Yeah.
I also want to mention convocation. It's also a
Yes.
duty day.
Yes. So, someone asked me that in the chat as well to cover that. Convocation is Thursday, and that is a duty day. And it's the same for faculty. Part-time can attend and they can get paid to attend, but it's not required. It is required for full-time faculty. And classified, same with classified, they would have to check with their manager if they'd like to attend. And convocation is sort of tiered. I think of it as you start off with everybody together and then it gradually gets smaller. So it starts off as a whole campus event in the morning. They're doing breakfast. Hopefully you all have received the invitation to that. If not, check with your dean or your supervisor. And there is Susie dropped the link in the chat. And then after that, it generally goes to division meetings. So it breaks it down into your smaller area. And then you usually have department meetings after that following lunch. So keep your eyes open for those. And again, that's required to attend. So if something happens and you're sick, you have to take it as a sick day.
And one more additional thing.
Yes.
It's hybrid this year. So you can either attend on campus or you can attend virtually. Registration is not mandatory, but we really, really, really want you to register so that we know how many people are going to be on campus and how many people are going to be online.
Thank you, Susie. Yes, and so the full convocation is going to be hybrid. Your division and department meetings might be different. So I know for humanities, I'm in humanities, that division where ours is online. And then my department meeting is also virtual. So I'm assuming most of them are doing virtual after the initial convocation, the full campus piece of it. So check if you're not sure. And I'm going to be attending. I hope to see some of you there in the morning if you're on campus. Any other questions about Flex or convocation? Anything anybody else wants to add that I might be? Okay, so I just see a question in the chat that was sent to me privately about where do we find our ad codes, and then they're not seeing it in WebAdvisor. So my suspicion is, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that they will be in WebAdvisor that the first day of class. So you don't have access to the ad codes before the first day of class. Does anybody know differently? Am I accurate?
The last couple semesters, I've actually received them on the Sunday.
The Sunday before?
By email. So I would think probably, I know they're doing it over the weekend because registration is closed on Friday. So yeah. Over the weekend, you should be receiving those via email.
Right. Excellent. Okay. So the next Sunday, you should be receiving those. And if you don't, I would check with your dean if you don't receive those. And do they also appear on WebAdvisor or just through email?
I don't remember. Maybe someone else remembers.
They're only through email. It never shows up on WebAdvisor.
Okay.
Yeah, usually we would get the sheets that have
right. That's how what.
But if you don't know in face to face, it's an email.
Yeah, all I'm thinking about are those yellow sheets that we get. We have to go to our mailboxes on Monday morning, but those days are gone. Anything else? Let's see if there's any other questions.
Carrie, I was going to add, if you come to the campus for convocation or Flex, the parking will be relaxed, so you don't have to worry about buying a parking pass or a one-day permit. It's relaxed.
Thank you for saying that. And I believe Omar, our vice president of, why am I blanking?
Administrative services.
Administrative services, thank you. I believe he said that that's for the whole year, right? Or at least the semester.
At least the fall, yeah.
Yeah, so you can park freely and enjoy it while it lasts. I was a student here 30 years ago and it's never been easy to park. So we'll enjoy this year of flexible parking. All right, do you mind moving on to the next slide? I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the pathway teams, and when I talk about guided pathways on Wednesday, it'll tie in with this. So there's a little bit of confusion. So guided pathways are, we've organized all of our programs into 5 pathways that I'll review with you on Wednesday. And along with those pathways, there is a team of support, a support team, so that a lot of colleges call them student success teams, if you've heard that phrase. And every student, when they apply to Fresno City College or when they enter Fresno City College, is assigned to a pathway team. And each of those has counselors, instructors, staff, and administrators that are knowledgeable about the programs in that area. So department chairs, often I sit on the culture, education, and society pathway. So as a department chair, but it doesn't have to be a department chair. The counselors are specialized in those areas. And then there's also financial aid support, tutorial support. So if a student, when you do the Starfish Early Alert, it goes to this pathway team, and then there's a coordinator who says, okay, this person needs to help the students with the resources. So it's case management and individualized support. And one of the things that we're doing the last couple of years as we've been implementing these pathway teams is we're focusing on equity, and we're particularly focusing on African-American males who it's the largest equity gap that we have among our students. So we're doing a lot of really focused intrusive methods to help students succeed in their classes. So students, Carol Rains-Heisdorf came and talked about the data. They're assigned priority points. So if a student, let's say a student is African-American male, and if they're, formerly in foster care or something like that, where there's things that historically have made it so those students need more supports, then we are focusing more energy. Those students will get more phone calls from the counselor if they haven't been attending class, or if the instructor says that a student needs tutorial services, then the outreach efforts will be heavier in those areas. So that's what it's really important to use Starfish Early Alert. This doesn't mean that we're not providing services to all students. We're just really focused on closing those equity gaps. So we're doing more with our students who have are in a demographic that represents a large equity gap. And as well, no, I'll leave it at that. Any questions about that piece? So the goals you can read this on your own. I won't read through the whole thing, but it's really focused on intentional support with somebody who's specialized in that area. So before, all counselors were in general counseling. Not all counselors, most counselors were general counseling. We do have CTE programs that have had specialized counselors for a long time. But now the counselor, because we have 300 something degrees and certificates, and that's a lot for any individual counselor to have a grasp of all the requirements for those particular areas. So this is really helpful to break it down for them. So intervening along the way, the key benchmarks, so that they do student educational plans with the students. So every student has to have we call them SEPs, the student educational plan, and it maps out their 4 semesters that they should be here. Most students are here longer than that, 60 units, but most students, our average is, I think right now we're at 87, I believe, is our average, which is way down from 102, which is where we were a few years ago. So we're improving the number of units that students have to completion. So those student educational plans are a big piece of that. I'm just going to say a note about this here. I might say more about this Wednesday. I can't remember if I have it in those slides. One of my concerns about these student educational plans when they first brought them to us, was we're not allowing students to explore. And I know a lot of you may feel the same way, that if we're telling students you have to take these courses. So what I tell my students, what I tell faculty who say the same thing that I used to say, is an average of 102 units is not exploring if a student needs 60 units. If we had an average of 65 units, that might be exploring. And most students are not exploring. Most students are trying to find their career path, right? So I was a student who explored, and probably many of you were students who explored. And so we have that in our head. So guided pathways is really about guided exploration. So, and what I say to students is, your student ed plan is not set in stone, it's a plan. And there almost always there are options in your coursework, unless it's English 1A or a very specific math class, or it's a major requirement. Other than that, the student almost always has flexibility in their educational plan. So I let the students know that when I usually have a slide the first day of class about the student educational plans, and that they are a plan. And if you take especially for my fellow philosophers might appreciate this, especially for philosophy, or if you're in an area where students don't usually major in philosophy, they don't choose it coming in, but they take a philosophy class and they fall in love with it, and they want to change their major, right? So we want students to be able to do that. If they find something they're passionate about, then of course we want them to explore that, but we also want them to understand what's required of them in order to graduate. So 102 units is probably students floundering around and not knowing what they're supposed to take. Any questions about that? And let's see, I'm seeing some stuff in the chat. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. So somebody, and I can't see who this is. It was Mike. Which Michael is this? Michael Eisinger. He transferred to Fresno State with 200 units. That's a lot. On financial aid, now you can only get financial aid for a total of, I can't remember the total, but it's limited. So you want to make sure that you're not encouraging students to take an excessive amount of units. 200 units is way over what you'd be able to get for financial aid. I want to say it's 160 units total, including your upper division work. So if it's 60 units here, 60 at Fresno State, 120, then you might have 40 units of flexibility total. And don't quote me on that. If you're really interested, we'll ask a financial aid person. Any other questions?
Carrie, there's a question in the chat from Jameson. How do we find what pathway our department is in?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about pathways on Wednesday. I'm going to share all that exciting stuff with you. But Susie put the link in the chat. And if you tell me if you put your department in there, I'll tell you which pathway you're in. So I'll tell you briefly, the 5 pathways are business, culture, education, and society. ACL is arts, communication, and language, health and STEM, and tech and trades. So those are our 5 pathways. And you might be able to, most of social science is in culture, education, and society. Obviously health and STEM speaks for itself, and arts, communication, and language, business. Most of them speak for themselves. Mine's a weird one. Philosophy is in culture, education, and society. Economics is in business. That's a social science though. So there's a few weird ones, but for the most part, it should be intuitive.
James is a geology instructor.
Geology is in health and STEM.
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Which wouldn't necessarily, I'm trying to think, no, geography was the one that we had geography split between social science and geology is obviously science, so irrelevant. But there are some that are weird where you might think it intuitively goes in one place, but it doesn't. Anything else? Okay, we're way under my hour. So Ray, go for it.
Thank you, Carrie, and that's perfectly fine. Today is it's really like a soft introduction to the 3-day New Employee Equity Academy. We have a full program for tomorrow. We have several guest speakers from different departments and functional areas of the campus, and the same thing for the 3rd day on Wednesday. So it's jam-packed for tomorrow and the next day. So just a heads up, even though we're finishing a little early today, we're likely not going to finish early tomorrow or Wednesday. We'll finish on time. We won't go over, but we probably won't finish early. So with that, before we close out, just wanted to open it up for any questions or any comments before we close. Seeing none and hearing none, I think we can close the meeting. Thank you all. You should be good to go for tomorrow and the next day in terms of your registration and your link for the for Zoom in the program. So with that, wishing you all a great day and looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Take care, everyone.